3 navigations, 2 rivers.
10 locks.
Is it 10 locks? And are we counting the stop lock?
No.
Okay. 10 and a half locks.
10 hours.
It was a long day. "7 a.m. and we're leaving Woking, heading towards the Thames. Started on the Basingstoke at Woking. Almost immediately ran over a shopping cart and destroyed it, apparently.
When you go over under a bridge, like we've been advised just to chuck the engine into neutral, so if you hit anything.
Yeah, and I heard a scraping sound and immediately cut into neutral, which is the only reason I didn't wrap this thing around our prop, but...
We reported it to the Basingstoke Canal Authority. We spoke to the guy and told him exactly where he was, and then he called you up, didn't he? Yeah.
He called me up and told me that the trolley had was the worse for wear, that, you know, you should see the other guy, sort of thing. It's about 10 after 8, and we're sitting at Woodham Top Lock, waiting for the lockkeeper to unlock the locks. They have to be unlocked so we can go down the locks.
We've got 6 locks to do before we get down to the Wey. Then there's 3 or 4 locks to do on the Wey, and then we head out onto the Thames. So the first locks went really well. The third lock, we kind of got into our rhythm. Well, I noticed that the last 2 inches of the lock just wasn't filling, so I checked the paddles. They seemed to be as far down as I could get them, so we ended up calling the Canal Authority, and the ranger came out pretty much within like 3 minutes. He was there. Meanwhile, Michael's just floating around in the pound. The lock filled up, but it wouldn't fill up the last 2 inches, so we couldn't get the doors open, the gates open, obviously. And I checked the paddles on the other end, and the water was leaking out of them, but I couldn't get the paddles down any further, so I thought there must be like a stick stuck in there. But we called the ranger out, and he came in like 3 minutes, which was amazing, and got the paddles down further, so they were just really, really stiff. But we're on our way again. But that was really embarrassing to know that I was, despite my best efforts, draining the pound.
From my position, it looked like they were all the way down. Like, you know, most of the time you can see a little tiny bit of the mechanics that are still a little high. It looked completely down.
But they were pretty good about it. So yeah, so we lost some time there. So I went ahead to get the next lock set, and then found the 3 boats coming up. So there was 2 volunteers. One was helping the 3 boats up, and the other guy was doing a water survey. So once the 3 boats had left and we'd gone in, me and the volunteer had to open the paddles as quickly as possible so that they could measure how quickly the water went down. So that was quite random but interesting.
And then it was to the end of the Basingstoke.
And it was incredible, like, just you get to the end of the Basingstoke and then you're under the M25, and it's like suddenly you're not on the Basingstoke Canal anymore.
Yeah, you've been on this beautiful corridor of just tree-lined beauty, and you know, you turn left and almost immediately you're under this enormous concrete structure, the M25, and there's absolutely nothing but industrial.
And the road above us seems to like rattle every now and then as a big truck goes past. And then there's the train going past
and
another
graffiti
bridge
everywhere. You know, there's already traffic. We're immediately behind a quite large narrow boat, and in front of a small cruiser style boat. But it was, you know, it was an interesting transition, and then we continued up the
Wey, and then it was like, oh yeah, I remember what the Wey was like. It was really nice.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
You get to the locks and they're immaculate. Like, the grass is all neatly mowed, and there's like a nice sign telling you about which lock you're at. Yeah, it's just so noticeably different, like we're in National Trust land.
Yeah. The guy in front of us
turned out to be a hire boat. I said to him, "Oh, is this your first day?" He said, "Oh, it's our second day. Does it show?"
Yeah.
Yeah. They pulled into the lock landing.
Smash right into the end of the landing.
And then I said to him, when Michael dropped me off, "Is it alright if we share the lock with you?" And he was like, "Yeah, but let me go first." Yeah, of course.
No problem. And he goes in first and just smash right into the lock gate. It went pretty well.
And we shared the next lock with them as well.
It's like anything. Everybody needs to learn what they're doing.
They were really nice people.
Yeah, they seemed really nice. I wanted to take advantage of there being the two boats, but I was mainly nervous about, like, okay, if they, if I go in front, I'm going to get rammed, and every time they take off, it's a full speed gun, so I'm slamming all over the place.
Straight after the lock, because we'd read every time we get to a lock, we read about it on the National Trust booklet.
On this one, there's a weir immediately before the lock, and then there's a maybe
really
30-foot wide output from the weir falling down, where the water's just gone around and down, and it's quite a large amount of current.
But then in the lock, he pipes up, "Oh, can we turn around here?"
And it's like, well, yeah, you can turn around there. It's definitely wide enough, but you're going to have this problem of this huge current coming across. Like you're going to come out and shoot that way, and so make sure you turn into it and everything. And then he's like, okay, you go ahead. So I'm like, okay. So we start driving forward, and I'm just like, should we keep going or should we stop and watch the show?
There was the Weybridge Town lock, which was fine.
Yeah, that was the one with the funny turn.
Yeah, so when you leave that lock, there's a really sharp left turn, but there's also a bridge to the right and no sign as to, typical of the way. And then there's just the last bit of the way, which was beautiful, and the biggest houses backing onto the
gorgeous, huge houses,
manicured lawn.
And then you pull up to the Thames lock, which is a manned lock, which is actually our first manned lock.
It's quite nice.
It was very nice.
Yeah, and we had to buy our transits.
Yeah, the transit license. You have to buy a transit license
because we were
if you're coming from the Basingstoke to the Way and onto the Thames. So it's £7.50.
A beautiful little lockkeeper's cottage with hanging baskets and another manicured lawn and
the main Thames lock is quite deep. And it's entirely manned by the lockkeeper. He runs around and does everything, and he's got this nice stick that he uses to pull the lock across.
And a clipboard where he logs who's coming and who's going.
And everything, and make sure everybody's paid up and stuff. And then you immediately enter into a pound that has a stop lock at the end. And so that basically, a stop lock was traditionally meant to sort of block two rivers or two canals at a junction point, so that one company wouldn't lose water to the other company. They were, they're sort of a strange remnant of the commercial nature of the whole reason why these canals were built. But now they're using it to control the level of the water in the lock itself. So they will raise the stop lock to raise the level of the main lock high enough that you're having enough draft above the sill, so that if you're in a boat that's got a lot of draft, then they need to raise them both. So then you need to drop through one, go through, and then wait to drop through the other. And then we turn out, and you do a left-hand turn as you come out through the stop lock, and what's directly in front of you, basically, but the Thames.
Oh my gosh. And then, so you've got, I can't even describe it. Yeah.
Having seen, less than 10 moving boats the entire day, to suddenly we're shooting out into... There's a narrowboat, there's a canoe, there's like 7 or 8 different cruisers. There's people on running racing, timed races.
And everyone's
on
just going
sculls.
in different directions, and there were some moorings there. And in hindsight, we should have just stopped at those moorings for the night. But by the
but
time
we wanted to get to a pump out.
Yeah, we had it in our mind that we needed to get a pump out and we needed to get a license for the Thames. So we just kind of, by the time we realised that, we could have stopped there, we were
already kind of past it.
And
then we're joining the traffic, so it's like I'm pulling in, there's a narrowboat coming across this way. He hits his horn. Yes, he's going to beat me across, so I need to slow down to let him pass. He passes. Then there's a canoe following him. Only the guy on the canoe is like randomly deciding he wants to change directions. So I'm like, I'm waiting for a canoe.
Add to that the fact that the river is 4 times as wide as the Wey ever was.
Yeah. And there's all these boats that are passing that are throwing chop up. So all of a sudden we're having our first experience of...
Not to mention it suddenly decided to be really, really windy.
Yeah, we got blown sideways a couple of times. We're going down the Desborough Cut, which is basically a straight, canal that has been cut into a natural meander in the Thames. You can go either way. The meander gets into some sort of shallow areas, so there's this straight portion where if you're in a hurry, you go down here. Well, it also means that it's a really good place for people to practice rowing. So there's like time trials going on. So the two of us are going along and we're following this other narrowboat, and then there's this red buoy. And
I'm like, are we supposed to be inside the buoy or outside? I wonder what that buoy is.
Yeah.
And just as we're kind of having this debate about this buoy, one of the rowing boats is coming up behind us, and Michael starts talking to them because they're going a lot faster than us.
Way faster than us. And there's a boat and a guy on the shore, both of whom have loudspeakers. The girl at the back of the boat who's calling to everybody about, their rhythm, she calls out to me and she's like, do you mind pulling to the side, or can you slow down? And I'm like, I'll just stop. And she's like, great, thank you very much. So I know she's got this expectation that I'm going to stop. And about the exact same moment that the person on the boat, in a very authoritative voice, says something about, canal boat, move over. And then the guy on the shore says, canal boat, no idea what he said. The person who's telling me to move over isn't indicating in what direction to move over. They also seem to have this idea that narrowboats are a thing naturally inclined to move sideways. So all I can do is just like, all right, throwing it into reverse, tapping the bow thruster to make sure I don't swing over in their direction at all. Not throwing up any wake or anything. I'm not, I'm slowing relatively carefully. And they go past and they turn and they head off. And now, the cox at the back of the boat, she waves, thank you. And the person, both of the people on their megaphones are like, canal boat, thank you. Canal boat, thank you. They don't tell me what to do next. And I've looked behind me and there's another one of these boats coming. So I'm like, I better just get on through here. So I crank up, the speed. Thing is, on a narrowboat, there's no such thing as cranking up the speed. These are not the fastest things off the chocks. And so by the time I'm halfway across, the boys behind me, and they're coming in to do their turn, they're still, apparently I've done the right thing, and, they're maneuverable enough to make it through. But the whole time I'm just like, how do I get this thing to move faster?
So then we were like, that's what the boy's for. Now we know. Yeah. So next on the agenda is going for a pump out.
Yeah.
And the nice man at the Thames lock on the way had looked up for us and found out that this was the closest pump out. So the turning is right on the other side of the river.
And it's really narrow.
It's really narrow. It's really hidden because there's a big boat moored just in front of it, but there's these 2 flags sticking up, so we work out where we go in. So we do this big turn across the river.
Across all the traffic, so that was a little bit
and
fun.
Then into view comes another cruiser coming out of the Marina.
Hey, 3 times the speed he should be.
He sees us and he thinks the best thing to do is accelerate to get out of our way. So.
Oh yeah.
So he kind of flies past us.
While also laying on his horn as I'm cranking into reverse and trying to get the front end over.
At which time the wind massively picks up, and then we're like inching into this marina with all these big shiny cruisers everywhere. I'm not really sure which direction we should go to get to the pump out.
The biggest marina I've ever seen.
It was incredible.
So we're pulling in, and there's a not extremely easy to see sign that slowly resolves to say, pump out pontoon.
But there's a big cruiser sitting there.
Yeah, because it's also the water pontoon.
So then this guy on a narrowboat in a mooring kindly tells us that there is a visitor mooring at 90 degrees to where the cruiser is.
Just on the other side of the cruiser.
So we start manoeuvring round, but the crosswind is just incredible. And you had quite a job to...
Yeah, so basically I had to kind of go in and, turn 90 degrees and come back. But as I turn 90 degrees, the wind catches it and starts pulling it back the other way. So now I've got to fight and get it. And, long story short, I pulled up to it and we got into place. Joe jumps off, pulls on the rope.
But the 90-degree mooring is on this tiny little pontoon that when you stand on the end just wobbles like this. And it only extends to half the length of the boat, so we can't even get the centre line on it, and the wind's blowing the boat the other way, and then we tie the back on too fast, so it was just... I go off to get the token for the ridiculously expensive pump out, and because this marina is so big, I have to walk for like 3 miles to find the marina office. And I'm sitting there trying to hold, I'm holding the boat on. I've got 2 ropes in hand. The wind starts shifting. So instead of coming straight at us with a little bit of a degree over the nose, it basically goes like straight across the bow of the boat. And I'm sitting at about a 20 degree angle. And I'm trying to tie on tight to this davit. And then you realise that the way the wind's blowing... It's blowing me into the position I need to be in for the pump out anyway. So you just need to manage the ropes and sort of let it go. So Joe starts walking back. I look over and she's got this look on her face like, wait a minute, wasn't the boat... No, I was like, thank goodness it's already moved and I don't have to get involved in moving the boat. So then we had the fun of the pump out, and it was a really expensive pump out, but thank God it was in... like working order. Yeah. Decent working order. So we get the pump out attached, and it's obviously not the most pleasant job, and Michael's decided to lie down on the pontoon thing. Because this guy who sold us the pump out said we've got a good 11 minutes, so it's enough time to do the pump out, put some water in and rinse the thing out. Yeah. So Michael's doing all that, and it comes to the time where we think it's empty, so we can put some water in to do the rinse. So he's already got the hose over there, so he shouts at me to turn on the water. So I turn on the water and then walk back to help him, only to discover that the hose has got like a series of holes, and just where he's lying, it's creating a fountain that's just going right over his lap. So I decide I'll run over and like move the hose so the water doesn't go on him. Meanwhile, he shouts at me to turn the water off, so I start going back to turn the water off, but then he says okay. So I think he wants me to come and move the hose, so I start going back. And in the end, I'm just watching her run back and forth, I'm like, unable to make a decision. What do I do? And I'm just like, there is freezing cold water shooting into my shorts. It's literally soaked, like it looks like you wet yourself. All this is doing is increasing the urgency of changing the toilet. So all we talk about as we drive out of the marina is the pros and cons of all the toilets. By this time it's like 5 p.m, like 10 to 5. And the lock keepers finish at 6 in June, so we had an hour to get to the Sunbury lock if we wanted to go through that and look for moorings. And on the map we could see there was a couple of places where there was moorings before that, but each time we got to them they were just full of boats, so we couldn't get on. It's like, will we end up going through the lock and trying to find one after, or will we find one before? And couldn't really read the signs to see if you could even moor there, and some of them you pay for and some of them are free. And then there was kind of a space outside a pub, I can't remember what the pub was called, but it was really noisy, and like the Swan. Was it the Swan? I mean, it looked inviting in the servers from the pub were actually delivering food directly onto the boat. But the other thing is, like, we shouldn't have done this on a Saturday. I mean, there was gongoozlers at every lock, which is okay, like it's not a problem, everyone's really lovely, but it just kind of, and then you've got all the weekend boaters out, so everything's busier. And the scullers doing their racing thing. Like it just, wasn't ideal that it was Saturday, but then I think that also meant that all the moorings were busy, because even like the day cruisers that were out were just, at the pub on the moorings, right? And they didn't need them all night. Yeah. But by this time it's like 10 past 5, we've still got time to get to the lock, but hopefully we'll find something on the way. And we did find something on the way. Directly across from a weir and a weir. Yeah, there's a noisy weir and there's a noisy pub, but it's all called the weir, but it's fine. Seems like a nice place. Yeah. After 10 hours, like, to be honest, anywhere would look fine. But they were pretty good about it. That's a very distracting fire.
you know, you're out there on a vacation type thing,
Holiday.
but holiday. You're out there on holiday to where there's a meander in the Thames, or Thames. There's a meander on the back of the boat, the one who's calling the rhythm, the cox, the coxswain,
Cox.
the cox.